Mr. Obama's announcement comes 9 months after he and Chinese President Xi Jinping made an historic agreement on emission cuts. Joining us from New York, Edward Cameron. He's a climate change expert and managing director at Business for Social Responsibility. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
First, I want to get your reaction to President Obama's clean energy plan. How realistic are the targets he's proposing?
Well, in rolling out this plan today, the president said that climate change is not a problem for another generation, not anymore. And frankly, for about 2 decades, the rest of the world has been waiting for U.S. leadership on this issue. Well, guess what? They don't have to wait anymore. I think that today's announcement is serious and ambitious in its own right because it tackles the main source of carbon pollution in the United States. But it's unprecedented when you add into this equation the other initiatives that the U.S. administration have been taking in recent months, which includes activities in collaboration with the Chinese government, a great deal more leadership, proactive leadership within the climate negotiations, and on top of that, not only action at the federal level, but action at the state level as well, with states like California, for example, coming out with their own emissions reductions pledges. So I think this is extremely ambitious. I also think it is feasible if you look at the reaction from the private sector community on this. Just last week, 13 major companies, brand names that are synonymous with brand USA, made an announcement at the White House that they themselves were committing to climate action. And this was companies like General Motors, Coca-Cola, Walmart, and Apple. So I think we're actually seeing the beginning of a new low-carbon economy emerging before our eyes. And I think this is a significant announcement to push us in that direction.
What about the possible challenges he faces here against various groups who are opposing this plan? How realistic will it be to get it through?
I think the challenges are going to be real, and I wouldn't underestimate what your reporter said a moment ago with regards to challenges that might come before the courts. I do think, however, we're approaching a tipping point on this issue. Yale University recently conducted a study that revealed that 70% of the American population are in favor of this particular proposal. There's a growing groundswell of support on climate action more broadly within the community at large. I think this notion that some leaders still cling to, that climate is an open debate, is a dying conversation, frankly, and that more and more of the people who are resisting this type initiative, it's incumbent on them now, I think, to come forward with their own alternative plan if they don't like this particular plan. I think, unfortunately, the Senate Majority Leader's plan for simply failing to comply with the law is not going to be considered, I think, a credible alternative. So I think the challenges are realistic. I would not delegitimize that in any sense. But I think one way or another, we as a community are going to have to grapple with this problem because the risks of inaction are too high. The opportunities of a transition are great. And to fail to seize that opportunity and to fail to innovate towards that opportunity would be a monumental mistake.
Edward, we mentioned China, the U.S., Brazil also agreeing to boost renewable energy sources. They're also working on reforestation in the Amazon rainforest. So with these various announcements from Brazil, the U.S., and China, do you think this is building more momentum to the big climate change summit in Paris at the end of the year?
I think it is. If you look at the state of play today, more than 40 countries around the world, representing more than 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions, have already come forward with climate action plans. And it's important to remember that these are countries with very different starting points. Not all of them are industrialized, prosperous countries like the United States. Some of them are emerging economies, some of them are least developed countries, and even in those countries where this transition will be truly difficult, they're taking the appropriate steps to decarbonize their economy, to innovate, to produce a clean energy economy of the future. But even more than that, if you look at the level of business action around the world, the We Mean Business campaign is working with thousands of multinational companies right across the globe, and already more than 200 of those companies, together with investors, representing more than $2 trillion of value, representing more than $7 trillion of assets under management, they've already made in excess of 350 commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I think whether you look at the political scene or whether you look at the movement within the business community, I think you see an irreversible and irresistible movement towards decarbonization, which is going to minimize climate risk, I think improve public health, safeguard human rights, and importantly, it's going to create new and better jobs.
All right. Edward Cameron, thank you so much for joining us from New York City.
Pleasure.